Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, helping higher education marketing leaders share knowledge about learning, strategies, and tactics that are relevant today. See what you can learn today by listening to one of our episodes.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Demand Gen podcast, hosted by Concept 3D. If you like our content, please follow and subscribe to us. I'll be your host today, Shiro Tori, and today I'm really excited to talk about mastering college content creation and leading a team getting creative with resources. For the topic, I'm very thrilled to speak with the Director of Content and Social Media Strategy at Oberlin College and Conservatory, which is Mathias Reed. Mathias, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So I do ask all my guests this, right? Tell us what you love about higher ed.
Yeah, it's a good question. As someone who went to a small school, studying music and interested in arts and stuff, I've always looked at higher ed as an awesome industry to work in. What I love about it, I'd say, is that it's a learning environment across the board. Everyone's focused on learning. Everyone's focused on continuing education, just as like a mindset, not even like as a degree pursuit. And yeah, I like being on a campus where that's happening every day.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And it was also really good to meet you in person at AMA. Was it just probably by the time this is posted 2 months ago? But
Yeah,
Mathias and I got to connect, and we actually attended a session together on I think the student journey and how students currently find out and figure out where they want to go to school. So it was great connecting with you in person.
you as well. Yeah, no, AMA was awesome. Can't wait for the next one.
Yep. Well, let's get into this. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and background in a minute or two?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned earlier, I studied music in college, piano performance. I was into piano and organ, and I quickly shifted during my time in college, actually, into video production, media production. And then straight out of college, I worked with a small B2B group, inbound marketing group, and really loved that work. It was really exciting to kind of do video production within the marketing world, expanded beyond kind of a higher ed group. And then from there, I moved out to Ohio, was doing a lot of production work within music and arts organizations, and then joined Oberlin. So Oberlin College and Conservatory, it's an awesome campus, tight community that we've got some world-class musicians within the conservatory and some amazing research that happens within our college of arts and sciences. And so I started here as a video producer, kind of going across the board, right? College con, performance videos, faculty pieces, student profiles, and all of that. After a couple of years, grew the team to a team of 2 for video production. And then this last year, I stepped into this new role as the Director of Content and Social Media Strategies. So that's working with an awesome team of 5, covering things from our alumni magazine production to our social media management as well. So it's a pretty exciting position. It's been a pretty awesome year, and yeah, I'm excited to see what we do in the next year.
That's amazing. How did it feel when you stepped up into this new role, managing a much bigger team?
It's a lot. It's exciting. It's also like a major challenge for me. I think one of the big things that I realized over the last, what has it been, like 7 or 8 months since I changed into this role, I think was the level of kind of collaborative mindset that I was already coming from. So, in the video production world, like you are as sort of strong as your like team and team mindset. That's how good the piece is going to be, right? Like even if everyone's at their top game, but like isn't really working together, or isn't really like as focused on the final piece, the final film or project, it can kind of it can carry out. It's just like an energy thing. So like shifting into this role has been cool reminder of that sort of team mindset, teamwork approach, collaborative workflow is like the key to leadership success, but also like team success. I don't know if that answered clearly, but
No, it's good. And do you work closely with like enrollment teams, other departments around campus? Speaking about team.
yeah, absolutely. So we collaborate all the time with our admissions team on a lot of the work there. So both in our communications office, we work closely with our design team, we work closely with web, and pretty much across the board. But then all our office is also working actively and constantly with admissions and enrollment.
Yeah, because I'm sure like admissions will come to you with some content requests or content collaboration requests, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a lot of collaboration on like our sort of admissions cycle materials, whether that's print, digital, and kind of like, shifting to an ongoing omni-channel approach is something I like to talk about in our sort of content across the board, whether that's admissions or sort of broader institutional brand alignment stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. I have a good question for you, but I'm going to save it for a few minutes when we get into it.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for explaining all that. So I'm talking to a content master, right? Why is content so important? And can you tell me about your take or what is authenticity antennas?
Sure. Okay. So like full disclosure, I don't consider myself a content master at all. um, and I am, again, what I do love about content and content production is that there isn't really, it's a daily sort of evolution. There isn't really like a mastering of it. You know what I mean? Like we're constantly, as a culture, shifting, like, especially in the digital space, especially in the social space, like it changes every day. And what sort of works and what doesn't, like, there isn't like a key magic that sort of just like is the code to solve this,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just plug it in to chat GPT or whatever, and it's like gonna like spit out exactly what you need to succeed as a content creator. But to jump into authenticity and kind of authenticity antennas, let's see. I mean, I think for us, a lot of times, we're focused on that interested student group, right? The interested students who are looking into their college journey and trying to find the right fit in terms of an institution to attend. And I think they are 110%, focused on authenticity. Like the antennas of authenticity are like super sensitive. And so, for me, I think it's really easy to see in those first 2 seconds on a piece of content, whether that's video or even just sort of written content in the stories space on Instagram or something, whether something is sort of market speak or not, whether this is like, the carefully worded brand notes versus that sort of user generated content approach, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. So for me, I think, authenticity is key, kind of always kind of jumping back to both for ourselves and kind of leadership positions, like, hey, does this ring true to that kind of brand core messages, the brand identity, and also as you get into like individual team contributors, giving some ownership there too. Like we like to collaborate a lot on that, send stuff around as a team. And we've expanded this semester into a stronger group of student contributors, student ambassadors in terms of our social space. And that's really helped as well to get a sense of authenticity into the content more consistently and kind of more evaluate that process. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling now. I feel like I
No,
missed
you're
this one.
good. No, you're good. No, you explained it. I mean, this is fascinating. I think that your content, you're focusing your content on being authentic as in terms of how it's perceived by students, right, or prospective students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's huge. Do you think that there's a shift in the antennas being more aware? Do you think with as Gen Z and soon to be Gen Alpha come approaching college age? Do you think that because of like the amount of content purely out there in this information age are making their antennas more sharp, and so like it's harder and more necessary now to focus on authenticity than we had to like 10 years ago. Just
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I think in my perspective, like what I'm seeing, the short answer is yes. I think the longer answer is, it's complicated. I feel like each generation, and even like there's micro shifts within that generation of like what they want to see, how they want to be served content, like what experience they're looking for in their college
mhm.
search, and just in general, right? In terms of overall content, because I think we get, obviously our role um, is brand aligned content and a broader sense of like communicating the values of the institution, partnering with admissions and enrollment. But I think we kind of always have to keep in mind like this content isn't existing solely in a higher ed space as well. Like people in the social space, they're scrolling through and they're getting either um, they're searching out specific channels and dropping into those, or like both of our experiences of Instagram, like your scroll is it could be anything, right? And so we have to be mindful of that when we're creating the content. And speaking to the sort of authenticity, sensitivity there, you know, I think we've seen a huge shift in the last couple of years. Pretty much, I'd say post COVID, kind of in the middle of COVID, but then post COVID, towards user generated content and a sense of like transparency. So another kind of way to think of authenticity. And students really seem interested in that in their search. Like they want to be able to hear directly from another student, see directly from another student what their housing and dining experience is like, what their academic journey is like, what their day to day life is like, which seems pretty basic, right?
Mhm.
When you think of like large level marketing strategies, you think, oh, we've got to hit all of these key metrics and make sure that we're hitting all of these key points and messaging. But at a certain point in that journey, the interested students just want to connect with another student and both um, see themselves in that journey and also like see sort of an expansion of what could possibly happen for them.
Yeah. I I think from my perspective as a marketer, like I call this type of content social proof. That's like from a corporate lens, right? Or
Yeah.
private in the private sphere lens. Like that's what I call it. But it's interesting because it actually makes me think of the session we went to at AMA, which talked about the student journey. And I was actually
Hmm.
surprised to find that the student journey still often starts with a search, like whether it's you come up in a paid search position or organic search. But like, and then the student goes to the website, learns about their program, etc. Again, that's why website's really important. But that third step in the journey, which is like the increasing the yield and the application process, was like the social content. The students will then, after the website, check out the social channels of their interested school and see if they could see themselves on campus, see if there's a piece of content that fits how they perceive the world, and if it fits with their or matches with their identity and their personality. And so, like, I think what you're talking to really closely aligns with that decision making process, especially around the social proof, by hearing and seeing UGC or user generated content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's this sense of like in the social space, it's always available. But it's also always changing. It kind of like that wall of content on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
or scroll on Facebook if you're still on Facebook in your admissions journey, like or TikTok, right? That is it can get buried so quickly. So
Mm-hmm.
we really try to focus on um, having sort of a consistency that comes back to our core values, that comes back to core messaging, even in those individual user generated pieces.
Gotcha.
And that's a balancing act. I think it was
Um,
cool also at conference. I was going to add, it was cool also at conference to see what they were doing at University of Miami, Florida. They actually had that really cool collab post where they're like, we're not the same person with Miami University, in Ohio, which I thought
Ohio,
was
yeah.
cool. Um, but I thought what was fascinating with their work is they were like, hey, look at Nutter Butter, look at some of these like, corporate partner accounts or corporate accounts that are or other brands, right, that are just really pushing the envelope of like what is sort of professional content or brand content, what is sort of completely off the walls looking at Nutter Butter here, into the just like user generated space. And maybe it's too far, right?
Yeah.
But that was a great presentation, and I really appreciated that sort of push towards like embracing
Hmm.
authenticity almost to an extreme.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love examples or talking about examples on the show because I think helps people contextualize and visualize because most people are listening in, obviously. I'm wondering, like, tying back to how you said you work closely with the admissions teams, like, what type of content has been working for you guys in terms of, reaching and partnering with admissions goals? Is it the UGC stuff as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's an ever evolving journey, and it's, I mean, metrics, there's so much data out there, right? At this point, like every
Hmm.
little piece of content that you publish on the internet, you can pull all of the analytics, and then you have to figure out how to interpret that. Um, and it's not always a 1-to-1 ratio of like, oh, well, because we posted that. It's frequently never a 1-to-1 ratio. But so trying to be mindful of that too within the content creation space. Some of the things that I think are working for us within social, and just in terms of like engagement and reach and just community building. Sort of the surprising one for us is the LinkedIn space. I don't think a lot of people look at LinkedIn and say, hey, this is, that's where the admissions journey happens. And I would agree, right? Like, I think often that's sort of the post grad or the alum space more than anything. But we actually see a lot of engagement in our LinkedIn space. We see a lot of folks weighing in, sharing, commenting, and just congratulating. It's probably the, in terms of like our off-campus community, it is probably the most supportive and engaged channel, and I think that's really cool to see. Again, is that admissions? Not necessarily, but it's also kind of reach and sort of brand awareness.
Hmm.
And I think that that's sort of a duality that like colleges are really embracing, right? That we are essentially, we should be approaching our mindset within marketing and communications as brands, and that that's a healthy way to look at it within not just the admissions journey, but the overall sort of institutional image and across channel. So LinkedIn has been really cool to see that growth. It's cool to see sort of, I'd say, organic shares, right? Folks that ultimately are sort of, what is it, like thirds or like two levels or three levels removed from us, sharing content that might be around a student internship experience that we've talked about. Um, and we framed within the LinkedIn space with company tags and stuff like that
Mm.
versus the Instagram space where it's really about that student, right? Um, and that's where I'd say, like, does that really answer the question of like what's impacting admissions? I don't, not necessarily, but it is cool to see the different communities come together on our channels, to see how current students will, rally around a student's internship experience and show up in the comments and the DMs around it. Um, and then in the LinkedIn space to see how professionals and alums and sort of some of our internship partners jump into that as well and just show the value of this education experience,
Hmm.
and also celebrate it. So LinkedIn
Yeah.
is kind of a surprise for me. Um,
And
I wouldn't have expected that pre sort of higher ed, but it's cool to see that continue to be a consistent, like positive community.
I know you think about everything, you factor in everything, right? Like school size, what your school offers in terms of programming. And I think it's very interesting to hear this because I think it really plays to Oberlin College and Conservatory because a lot of your graduates and alums, they go on and do amazing things with their life that does play well to LinkedIn, sharing your successes on there. And I think to your school size, which is on the smaller end, like I think it plays really well. So I think it's interesting to see it being leveraged as a channel or being successful as a channel. And I think if if you're a similar school size and you have unique programming, like even you haven't thought about LinkedIn, I think it's worth a test, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say don't. don't skip on LinkedIn, even if it's just cross posting. And you can get more, I mentioned omni-channel, like that's something that we are leaning more into as we move into this next year. And so kind of thinking about the segmentation of content, same content, but maybe different packaging, or same content and a little bit of a different framing, right? Like it's posting in the LinkedIn space and saying, hey, this was an internship at this company. Let's make sure that we include them in that description and tag them so that we can get some engagement from them, but also like build a stronger image and network there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And again, I don't think I mentioned earlier, like our campus size, our student bodies like 2,950, I think, at the moment, give or take. So fairly small compared to some of the larger schools out there. But yeah, it's cool to see the kind of the reach in the grad space and in the alum space there. And even current students, again, to the internships and those sort of opportunities happening and being celebrated within the sort of professional social media channel of LinkedIn.
Yeah. No, I like that. I'm obviously on LinkedIn a lot, so I love always talking about LinkedIn. I know you mentioned a little bit about omni-channel and things you want to do next year, but in your short time leading this team now, like how are you shifting your team to better support the needs of today, and then also like doing that all with constraints and resources as well?
That's a great question. One of the sort of team shifts we've worked on is leaning into social. I wouldn't say we're like exclusively a social first mindset, but I do think social takes the lead a lot of the times in terms of how we're approaching content. And so it's saying, what might have been more of a kind of classic like online news approach, and then it gets segmented out to channels. We are leaning towards a kind of a social first, but then also an omni-channel approach. So again, it's that like, hey, how do we segment the same work that we've done, the same legwork we've done, the same content we've assembled to fit within, a short space on YouTube, and also a sort of a celebration piece on LinkedIn. So
Right.
some of the other things we've done in terms of leveraging the sort of the resources that we have is lean into user generated content. I think what's cool about user generated content, and I'm like super excited that this is happening in the higher ed space, is that, it's essentially our customers, if you will, or our students become our strongest advocates for the next class. And that's so cool. And that's like, I think that's almost a unique quality to the higher ed market, compared to some of our sort of out of higher ed, other businesses or other markets, right? Where user generated content might be a little more difficult to navigate or to produce or to, encourage and leverage. Like in higher ed, like we have 2,950 students who are here, who are users, and a certain majority are interested in creating content or are already creating content. And so that's a really cool like opportunity to have. So I'm like super excited that that's happened. A little bit of a backstory there, like in my experience starting in video for higher ed, a lot of the push when I first started back in 2017 was for sort of like top tier production value, like really showing, hey, this is our beautiful campus. See all of our drone shots, like see all of our, like cinema shots. Let's make sure everything's got that like DSLR shallow depth of field / we've brought a red in to film this one spot, and, like a really big production value. And I think that still has a place in like some of the pieces that you produce, but it's really, I think, helpful to see that kind of broken down and shifted into again, that authenticity of user generated content and the transparency that I think the next few generations are looking for in their journey.
I did have a question about, so UGC is like, I talked to Bowling Green State, Brianna, she's amazing. She does like a bunch of like what's popular on TikTok and Instagram, which is like they have a bigger school, so they drive around in a golf cart and they do those little like
Yeah,
mini mic questions.
I saw
And
that.
that's like technically UGC, but that's also like that's one half of it where like you're still leading the conversation, going out producing it. And then there's the other side of UGC, which is like what Amazon does, right? Like they like the customers who buy the product will post about it themselves, and then like the
Right,
company may take that post and then repost it, or even like add it to their quiver in their image, like, hey, this is like a testimonial a customer made, but like it's so good that I'm gonna add it to like our product images or description. And so
right.
like how do you think of UGC? Like, are you creating it and are you going on campus and getting stories from students, or are you actually like getting students to post about their experience on their own and then taking that content and finding out ways to redistribute that?
Yeah. So the short answer is we are currently more modeled after, you know, being the initial reach
Yep.
for that content. But I'll point to another example to kind of give you how we've shifted mindsets around user generated content, and it's kind of in between. So my VP last year was like, hey, I really want to focus in on some of this internship content, internship coverage, um, and find ways to, share the awesome internships that are happening for our students over this coming summer. And that was a big lift for us, but it was also an opportunity, right? It was like there's a resource limitation here. Like at the time, you know, given our resources, it's like we weren't going to fly someone around to film a bunch of videos across the country, but also internationally. And it was a great opportunity to like pivot creatively and figure out what are some ways for stronger content that still carries these messages and tells these stories. And we leaned into authenticity for those. I think this is where I shared in our other conversation around this. The inspiration for this was kind of pulling from some of the work that I saw Airbnb doing. That was like this meld of like user generated content, really simple. Let's pull a couple of photos and tell a story, right, around someone's travel experience. And they're not even sharing locations in terms of like, hey, they stayed in this amazing place. It was just like, here's 5 pictures and a short story about, this couple's trip to Japan, or this couple's, staying with an awesome host in Italy, I think was another one. And I'd seen those and I was like, oh, that could be really interesting to approach with a limited budget. So we leaned into that with our students interning around the country and around the world, um, and really, reached out to them, uh, had them work on collecting some content, reflections, kind of modeled it after that, like, sort of a phone call to home, like, hey, this is what I'm working on. And here's a couple of snapshots that I'm going to text you, and that type of thing. And that model like has worked really well, and we've continued that forward into a couple of other spaces with study away programs, and a second set of internships now this year. So yeah, I think it's a great sort of success story, if you will, of like both pivoting a limited resource situation where you still want to be able to tell those stories and share them directly with your audiences, but also an opportunity for kind of the user generated model, and a more authentic, kind of transparent way of sharing that.
No, I really like this. And just to distill down, like what I'm hearing from you is like it is possible to have students actually create their own content and then redistribute or repackage it as a marketing team, and not even using your own bandwidth to like go out there and schedule time in a day and a location for a shoot. You can actually have students create their own content, but you do have to be like specific with your ask and what it's for. And like you had a great use case here, which was like interns around the world. Like I wouldn't send an email to all of our undergrad first year students and be like, hey,
Right.
can you record a selfie of yourself of your experience so far? Maybe that'll work, but like it's your ask was very specific. And I think that, like if someone came to me and it was that specific, I'd much more likely be inclined to do something. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It is cool. And I'd say like, there's some like there was a learning experience. Like round one was definitely
Hmm.
more of a challenge out the gate of like, okay, how does this work?
Yeah.
What are we specifically asking students to do? And we've kind of found a great balance of sort of the self-collect model and then the packaging we pretty much do that kind of edit post-production process we do in-house.
Hmm.
And then we often, not exclusively, but a lot of the model at this point for these types of pieces is sort of a post experience interview, if you will, or again like reflection piece. And those actually, like my favorite part of this is, we kind of split it again within the narrative side. So they are telling stories. There's a voiceover component talking to the experience, and these are short pieces. Where this is somewhere between. They vary in length between sort of 30 seconds to a minute for the basic internships. And then for some of those larger study aways where they are a longer experience, we bumped that to kind of a 1 minute 1 minute 30, sometimes 2 minutes range because there's usually like just tons of material to work with. Um, so back to the narrative side, the approach that has worked for us with that is, yeah, we start with the kind of written reflection to kind of get them focused in on what their experience was and how they want to share it. And then we record that in person when they're back on campus, Um, and we start with that and then we break out with questions from there. And it kind of is a great balance in the edit between like, hey, we've got that specific structure that we need, and then you
Hmm.
get these awesome reflection points that are just clear, um, and unique, and things that we might not have thought of in the kind of like talking points we want to cover for this piece, but really kind of bring back that sense of authenticity, the sense of transparency, and the ways that I feel like, again, those users, those students are sort of the best, you know, advocates for the sort of what the campus culture is and the experiences. So,
Yeah, nice tie back to the authenticity portion too. A good way to wrap it up. That's amazing. Well, if you made it this far, I think that was a perfect framework to creating UGC content with relatively low resources or limited resources. So appreciate you sharing that. That's amazing to hear. Well, this has been fun. I know we're just at about time. I'm wondering where our listeners can understand a little bit more about what you're doing and where they can connect with you.
yeah, absolutely. I myself am on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to connect with me. I spend as little time as possible on other personal channels, which is funny, but it's, when there's like the work side, I try to just keep that time for work time on social. And then, but yeah, if you want to reach me directly, I'm on LinkedIn. Matthias Reed, I believe, is the URL, but you should find me there. And then in terms of Oberlin, feel free to follow us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, obviously YouTube, TikTok as well. We didn't talk about TikTok, but that's happening. And yeah, look forward to connecting with folks and learning more because, as I said before, I think the mastering of college content creation is a daily endeavor, and a great goal. So I really appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is great. I'm glad we finally got to do this. So thank you for your time. And I'm excited to see all the good thing you're going to be doing next year. So let's check back in.
Yeah, sounds great.